Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to see a few names on the list of our guests today. I'm especially happy to see my dear colleague, Emmy Zohar, as it is one of our last lectures, one of our last days, to host her as a fellow at Nicolaus Copernicus University in Toruń. We already said our goodbyes in the city, but still the fellowship is on, and Emma is going to present a paper that I think very nicely represents her main topic of research that she's pursuing during her fellowship in Toruń. Her current project is entitled Within the Pale of Pleasure, Polish Jews and the Pursuit of Happiness, 1918-1939. And in this topic, Emma focuses on the everyday life practices of Polish Jewry in the independent Poland. Her research analyzes the consumer and leisure habits of the Polish Jewish community in contrast to the image of the epitome of Jewish suffering. And of course, she's great with very nice methodological tools. She focuses on the history of emotions, for example. And today, her topic is there a Jewish nature? Gardening education in Jewish schools in interwar Poland. Emma, the floor is yours. And of course, you are waiting for the questions afterwards.
Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for the time during my fellowship and the nice introduction. And as Kinga said, I'm going to talk a bit about Jewish gardening education in Jewish schools. And I would like to start with a joke. Kinga, can you please turn the page? Okay, so this is for the one of you that can read Hebrew. So the joke is from a Hebrew kids book that was published in Warsaw, probably during the 30s. Yerachmiel, which was age 4, is digging in the ground while trying to put a feather of hen into the garden soil. "What are you doing, my child?" his mother asks in surprise. "I would like to plant this feather in here, and within a year we will have a hen." This joke reflects the stereotypes of lack of proper understanding of nature and natural processes among Polish Jewry. The image of Jewish life in Poland cannot be further away from nature, agriculture, and gardening. This well-rooted image has several reasons. First, the common occupations of Jews in trade and finance. Second, the restriction of owning land and farms in Tsarist Russia, and the rapid urbanization processes among East European Jewry. But perhaps the main reason is that this image was encouraged by the Zionist movement that wished to clearly distinguish between the New World and the Old World. This approach helped to establish the image of Polish Jewry life as a life detached from nature. In its task to build the new Jewish model, the Zionist movement sought to shape its principle in contrast to life in the diaspora and to encourage nature and agriculture-related life in the land of Israel. The Zionist movement approach was led by Ade Gordon, Yosef Berdichevsky, and others. Berdichevsky, one of the central Zionist scholars, was deeply influenced by the German approach of the Lebensreform. He believed that in exile, the Jewish existence is not related to nature. To fulfill the Zionist goal, the Jewish people must adopt a different way of life. The new Jewish man must maintain some kind of connection to nature, and indeed, the Zionist ideal, Halutz, the pioneer, is connected to nature and his land. Despite this image, a close look on primary sources reveals that Polish Jewry very much appreciated nature. Over the years, growing number of Jews practiced hiking in the forest and mountains, enjoyed ski, or went to soak the sun at the seaside or in holiday retreats. As part of the environmental awareness that started to rise, Jewish schools in Poland included in its curriculum gardening lessons, which were not only an important part of the pupils' and teacher activity during the day, but were also central within the Jewish local community that gathered around those schools. Those gardening lessons were part of varied curriculum of science studies, included subjects as biology, physics, chemistry, geography, agriculture, etc. All of those were taught not only in the classroom, but also via hands-on experience in the school labs, gardens, and trips in the near and far area. This talk will present the science and gardening education in Jewish schools in interwar Poland. It will focus on the Tsisho School Network, the central Yiddish school organization in the Polish Republic, that was founded in the early 20s by three secular non-Zionist parties, the Bund, Poalei Zion Left, and the Volkspartei, and was a central part of the non-Zionist Jewish independent educational system. As the importance of nature is less clear in the non-Zionist movement, revealing its approach toward nature through the lens of education can give us a hint on how nature was perceived among Polish Jewry. The Tsisho science curriculum was influenced by the way these subjects were taught in the education system in Russia and Germany. Exposure to science has already begun in the lower grades, and lessons included intuitive experiments and discussion on their methods and outcomes. The purpose of science studies at this age was to expose children to basic scientific phenomena and to encourage them for thinking and curiosity. At older ages, the children work in labs in a more formal and regulated way. The laboratory experiments were usually accompanied by the study of theoretical material or scientific theory related to the field of experiment. Tsisho saw the importance of exposing, even to a limited extent, to children, to a natural phenomenon they have never been able to see, such as marine life, wildlife, various agricultural phenomena, seasonal in nature, etc. It is important to note that most of Tsisho schools were located in an urban environment, as was the majority of the Jewish population in Poland during these years, and children's access to nature was limited. Therefore, teachers attempted to take walks in the outdoors and point out the connection between formal teaching in the classroom and the informal experiences. For example, when the children studied during geography lessons on water resources, the class took a trip to the lake and rivers in the near environment. It is interesting to see that not only did the pupils go outdoors, the teachers, Kinga, if you can turn the page, the teachers' team also tried to enjoy nature and educate themselves by experimenting. For example, as we can see in here, the staff of the Borchov school in Kalisz, which was part of Tsisho, went for a walk in the Carpathian mountains. In April 1921, a conference of teachers of nature and science was held in Warsaw. About 70 teachers, 20 from Warsaw and 50 from other parts of Poland, participated in the conference. During the 4-day conference, the teachers discussed issues related to teaching of the subjects in school and were exposed to new teaching methodologies. Two of the key topics discussed by teachers were the difference between science and nature lessons in urban and rural spheres, as well as the gaps between teaching the subjects in the lower and upper grades. The conference delegates were exposed to the methods of working in a school garden and learning methods of laboratory management. The concern of educators and teachers was that the scientific textbooks trained the younger generation to the theories as they learned from a book that presented pictures and graphs, rather than from experiment and nature itself. Therefore, the curriculum sought to be as hands-on as possible. As far as resources were available, Tsisho teachers set up labs and gardens in schools and integrated experiments within the curriculum. Additionally, teachers attempt to connect science studies to everyday life, highlighting the influence of geography and weather on the evaluation of culture and human life around the globe, or the effect of the invention of electricity on Western society. To adopt the curriculum of the Tsisho main purpose, Yiddish routine, and the creation of Yiddish-only textbooks, educators had to create a new scientific language, since Yiddish was not a spoken everyday language, and no scientific terms and concepts were existed. Dictionaries were published by Tsisho Pedagogical Journal, which translated basic concepts in Russian, German, and Polish into Yiddish. Furthermore, the journal contained the Tsisho science curriculum, bibliographic list, and recommendation for German and Polish articles in various topics. As the journal was published in Yiddish, the content of the article and the main issue it discussed were translated as well. It is important to note that Zionist schools in Poland, such as Tarbut, underwent a similar process during the 20s. A key figure in the development of science and nature education programs and its translation into Hebrew in Poland was teacher Shlomo Farber. Farber, a graduate of the teacher seminary in Vilnius, also taught at the Tarbut school and was part of an urban Talmud Torah. The translation from Russian, Polish to Hebrew, Farber noted in his memoir, the translation from Russian, Polish to Hebrew was not easy. In those years, the terms in physics that are spoken by Hebrew speakers were not yet available. It can be described how the lesson seemed. The pupil helped in interpreting the concepts, spoke in several languages in class. Two key figures in the formation of the Tsisho science curriculum were Avraham Golom and Dr. Israel Beaver. Many guidelines were published by Tsisho Press, Dina Yeshul, especially during the 20s. For example, in 1924, Golom published the article The Work Principle in the Laboratory, in which teachers were exposed to methods and formulas available for many scientific experiments. Among the topics that Golom emphasized in this article were formulas for measuring water quantities, freezing and melting temperatures, measuring wind speeds, etc. A textbook used by Tsisho teachers was Natural Science, Wind and Water, which was written by Birnbaum and Kassel. The author presented a structured methodological approach, which included a short text followed by a series of comprehension questions relating to the material being studied. The first chapter of the book poses to children the following question. This book, which you read, is it part of nature? Why? The authors intended to make it clear to the pupils that everything around them is connected in one way or another to the nature and science and scientific world. Additionally, they emphasized the importance of conducting experiments in classrooms and laboratories with various measuring instruments, some of which are presented as illustrated in the textbook for a clearer understanding of the experiment and its results. As mentioned before, in April 1921, the Tsisho teachers meeting discussed methods of setting up vegetable garden in schoolyards. The ideas of setting up a garden where the children could walk the land and enjoy their product was not new. A comprehensive article dealing with the school garden was published in 1921 based on the ideas of a Czech scholar, Jan Comenius, who worked in the 16th century and saw the importance of exposing the children to earthwork, planting trees, growing vegetables, and watering the flowering. In the opinion of the author of the 1921 article, the establishment of school gardens in the Tsisho educational institutions was one of the most prominent signs of the change in modern Jewish pedagogy. In the same article, the writer, whose name is not mentioned, discussed the methods of soil preparation while explaining the importance of crop and fertilize and focus on the teaming of plants, sowing, and planting of different crops by months and seasons. The author explains what water should be used to water the crops, as well as how to deal with changes in weather and pests. The author pointed out that in the school gardens, it was also possible to breed chicken and rabbits, thus learning about animals. Later, the author explains the significance of working in the school garden to pupils, especially in a school that educates working class children. The writer emphasized the meaning of educating the children for the land's work, understanding where the food they consume come from, how the environment changes, and how the person utilizes it to his advantages and needs. One of the most important elements of working in the garden is the collaboration between the pupils and the teachers. The teacher, whether the teacher is in charge of the garden or the classroom educator, has the responsibility to work with and to guide the pupils. It is important to note that the agricultural products of these gardens were not intended only for pupil self-consumption, especially within the school kitchens, but also for sale and fundraising purposes for the school activity. Several examples of the sale of the products of the Yud Lamed Perek school garden, which contributed hundreds of zloty to the school's balance, are mentioned in this article. In 1926, Dr. Israel Beaver published an article addressed to the Tsisho school teacher, aimed to regulate the science and nature curriculum. Beaver detailed the desired curriculum while referring to the division into different age groups and seasons of the year. Beaver specially stated that first and second grade students should not study science and nature. The third grade student will begin with general exposure to the most basic topics and subjects, while most of the study will be in the 4th through 7th grade. In nature studies, children are meant to be exposed to different types of natural habits. Whenever possible, Beaver recommends visiting studied natural spaces. In this way, pupils are exposed to fields, lakes, meadows, forests, orchards, gardens, and even deserts and sandy areas. Beaver notes that only in the 5th grade, pupils will begin to work in the school garden. In this year, pupils and teachers are expected to plant plants in the spring according to the regulated program. Beaver also notes that that in large cities where it is not possible to set up garden around the schools, students will visit a community garden nearby. This is how Esther Rosenthal-Schneiderman, a teacher at Tsarist School in Warsaw, described the natural science lesson in the school she taught. Lisa Orskes was a natural science teacher at our school. At every opportunity, the young school teachers would invade her lesson and sit amazed. Every child here is a botanist, and the classroom a real laboratory, created by the pupils with their own hands. It was all so new, so fascinating. We still remember well how we, being pupils at the same age, learned about nature only from the book, and nothing was shown to us. From observing natural science notebooks of 4th and 5th grade in several different seashore schools across Poland, much can be learned about the curriculum as well as the teaching methods. The notebooks saved at Evo archives, and now I saw that most of them also online, are filled with illustration and drawing of the material taught per the accepted principles of the Tsisho, which saw the use of art and craft as an important pedagogical tool in each of the studies subjects. Abraham Spiegel, nature book, which is what we see now, a 4th grader at one of the Tsisho school, dealt primarily with botany and plant structure. Each page, Kinga, you can, there are some. Each page appears with a title and a theoretical explanation of the material being studied, and at the bottom of the page, there are drawing in pencil and colors according to the subject of the lesson. Abraham seemed to have copied what he saw with his own eyes, petals from several angles, a flower ovary, the roots of various kinds, as well as cross-section of beetroot, as we saw in the previous one, and onion, in here. Various drawing of plant life circle, including germination, blossom, and flowering, and various drawing describing the differences between trees and bushes, as we can see in here, as well as specific emphasis on a potato, cabbage, and kohlrabi growth processes. Children have experiments with growing of these plants, perhaps even in the schoolyards. Nature was also presented in other subjects, as we can see from the geography book of Azriel Denmark's 4th grade pupil. This is the next, no? Yes. A map of Palestine is accompanied by 2 pages that describe quite technically the geographical features of the region. Azriel described the dimension of the country, important cities and mountains, and the population size. Among these, there are specific reference to the weather, which is hot, and to agriculture, which he includes that main crop of Palestine is wheat. In the light of the evidence presented, we can claim that nature and science were important subjects as part of the basic education in Tzisho. However, despite the widespread preoccupation in the pedagogical journals, there are only few references to the existence of school gardens. It is likely that in practice there were few schools gardens due to lack of resources and poor conditions. The most detailed source can be found in Lea Chamilevsky's description. Chamilevsky described how at the Tzisho Borchov school in Kalisz, she set up a vegetable garden where teachers and students worked. What is interesting about Chamilevsky's description that is attributed to this activity as an extracurricular activity. Chamilevsky explicitly writes that, and I'm quoting, "We did not only settle for studying according to the official plan, but also paid attention to work and crafts. We founded a garden, planted and grow vegetables. Give the frequent references in the writing of the Tzisho leadership, Chamilevsky's description may indicate a gap between the leadership desire and what happens in practice." Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma. It was as interesting as always. We are in a very small group here, so I want to encourage everyone, if you want to ask questions, feel free to do it whatever way you prefer. So you can use microphone and just start to speak. You can write it in the chat, whatever is best for you. Please just ask Emma your questions. I will start with mine. Can you give us maybe some broader overview of what was the idea behind the Tzisho education? Like, what were the subjects? Like, what other subjects than geography and just natural education were included for those pupils?
Actually, I think that Tzisho school is an extremely interesting one, if to be honest, and it's kind of different to reference, the way that the Bund's branches of Tzisho had the curriculum is a bit different from Poalei Zion left, for example. So if we're talking about language lessons, so obviously in Poalei Zion left, they had a bit more of Hebrew lessons. So around, 3 hours a week, but only, from 4th grade. And so it's not that from 1st grade they started to expose to Hebrew, but it took a bit of a time. It's like the 3rd language, okay? So they had Yiddish, obviously, and then Polish, and Hebrew as well. But the Bund Tzisho schools did not have Hebrew at all. Also, they had sport lessons, theater, arts and crafts. They really liked those arts and crafts. Mathematics, obviously, and at some point they also started those sexual education lessons. Yes.
Really?
Yes, it was at the end of the 30s. It was not that common in the non-Zionist movements, which was very common in the Zionist movement. So if we're, thinking of the Shomer HaTzair with those, how they used to call it, erotics. I just read this protocol of the Halutzim, and they call it the erotic problem. Okay, so over there it was kind of discussed, but in Tzisho and the other non-Zionist youth movement, it was not that common. But during the 30s, the late 30s, they started to talk about it as well. Music was very central topic, and history, of course, and literature, which in here also they had this, debate between the more Zionist group and the non-Zionist. So are we going to refer to Jewish history as part of global history, or whether we will dedicate lessons, especially, to Jewish history? And Bible as well. Is Bible part of global history, or should we refer to it as a special subject learned in school? So this is, and everything obviously in Yiddish, learned in Yiddish, it was private school network. So even though you had to pay, but because of the audience target was quite poor and from a very low socio-economic background, so most of the children or the families did not pay at the end, but they had to. They intend to pay. The Polish authorities were kind of, they had to check the curriculum, which was, kind of hard for them because it was in Yiddish. So they had to translate everything for them. But then, the officials arrived to see lessons in the schoolyard, in the school class, and they could not understand, anything. So it was again this, tension or gap between the Polish authorities and the private Jewish school network. Yeah.
Do you happen to know maybe if there was anything like that, anything similar in Polish educational system? If there were any kind of classes that were not only inside the classroom with biology textbook, but with some outdoor activities like gardening? Did you could mention in any way?
In the public Polish educational system, the only thing that I found kind of similar is a theater lessons or the practice of theater, which was again very central in the Polish educational network, the regular one, but I never saw this kind of reference of gardening education in the Polish school network, which I believe they had. I guess that in a way it was more central in the, or I don't know if more central, kind of central in Tsisho because of this reference of the Zionists. So even though Tsisho was not Zionist, they work, in kind of a balance. So it was some kind of reflection of what the Zionist educational system, thought was central. Okay, so
Emma, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Can you see
because
me?
I cannot see you, or is it just me?
I can. Now you can?
Now you're coming back to us. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you are.
So did you hear my last?
Yes.
Okay, so so it was kind of reflection to the Zionist movement, and I guess that because it was, walking the ground, the land was very central in the Zionist movement. So in a way, it was also became kind of central also in Tsisho.
But of course, what they were teaching in those classes were strongly connected to what was possible to grow in Poland. Like it wasn't like Halutzim, and they weren't preparing for Palestine, but they were doing specifically things like typically Polish type of vegetables and etc.
Yeah, but it's nice, this Lecha Milewski, which we also talked about in our last meeting. So her it's like it's a short, 6 pages memoirs that she writes, and it's nice because she's talking about taking those pupils to the local museum in Kalisz. So they went there in order to learn about the local history, most of it non-Jewish. So in a way, it's kind of the Jewish street was not purely Jewish, okay, and the Polish street was not purely Polish. So the combination and the mix and match all the time was there all the time, and in a way, it also reflects in the curriculum in Tzisho. So they did not learn only Yud Lamed Peretz or Shulem Alechem. They also learned Pantadeusz. So it was part of. Polish was the second language taught in the school, but as we know, Yiddish and Polish was well spoken in the Jewish street. So I have those protocols that during breaks in Tarbut school, which was the Hebrew was kind of the language of study. So the pupils used to speak Yiddish in the schoolyard during breaks. So it's this combination. It's kind of the tension and the gaps was very much present in the Jewish school curriculum. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think we have a question, so I will read it out loud. From Paul. I do have a question, and it's only indirectly related to the topic. Here we are talking about Polish Jews and whether their culture should be considered more Polish, more Jewish, both or neither global. Is there any evidence that the opinions of Israelis or Polish Jewish ancestry in Israel are more or less pro-Ukrainian than Israelis of Russian ancestry? Do the groups vote differently in Israel now? You're free to answer however you please.
It's a good question, and I think that now with the war going on, which is always it's very central here in Israel. We used to say that until 3 weeks ago, for Israelis, Russian and Ukraine were kind of the same. Okay, so it's kind of complicated to put the boundaries. As I said, the Jewish street was not purely Jewish. The Polish street was not purely Polish. So it's kind of kind of hard for me to put the boundaries between Ukraine, Russia, Lithuania, Poland. In the what I can say that if we are thinking of the Israeli education system, so and I mentioned Farber earlier. So he was he brought with him a lot of he immigrated to Israel during the 30s. Also Lecha Milewski, but he was very central in the Haifa educational educational system. He was the one of the principal of Hareali, Bet Sefer Hareali, which is the only private school in Israel or in Haifa. Now we have more, and then he established the zoo in Haifa. So lots of the ideas that he kind of observed in Poland, he brought it with him to Israel. So it's kind of but again, he was born in what now is Lithuania. Okay, so it's kind of hard to put the boundaries.
Yeah, thank you. We are waiting for follow-up questions from Paul if he made to answer another question. But I will add one from me, also quite connected to the one of Paul. So with this, you have analyzed many curriculums from this subject from around whole Poland as it was in the interwar period. And did any differences struck you that were connected with the different parts of Poland, like that there was something typical from central Poland, something typical, I don't know, from these lands that are now Ukrainian? Was there anything like that at all?
So I tried to trace, after those local changes of curriculum, and I have to admit that it was quite hard because most of Tsisho schools operated in Warsaw and its surroundings. So, and then you have this. This is the tension between rural and central influences. So it was most of the leadership of Tsisho sat in Warsaw, taught in Warsaw. So it was kind of the central kind of influence, and also the teachers were used to immigrate, let's say, within Poland. So as we talked about Chamilewski, so she grew up in Warsaw, if I'm not mistaken, and then she moved to a small settlement, and then moved to Kalisz. So it's kind of hard to say because the teachers themselves were kind of moved from place to place. And also it's important to say that Tsisho, but also Tarbut, had their own seminar for teachers. So and it was very important for the Tsisho leadership that at least the principal of the school will be graduated from those seminars. So the way that they were kind of taught how to be teachers were very regulated. Okay, were very were kind of the same. But as I said, we can see that in each places they kind of add the historical, the local history of the place. It was very important for them. But again, it was very much the Tsisho idea, okay, or that the pupils will know the place that they are living in, so they will know the history of the place, the local place, not only the Polish, broader history, but also the very, very specific history of Kalisz, Łódź, whatever, and also the nature around them. I have those, pupils that describe the forest nearby or the lakes nearby, and they have these small maps of mapping the area around the school, which is nice in a way, but I'm kind of I know that this was an important or central theme of the Tzisho leadership, but I'm not quite sure. Well, I cannot know. I have no materials to check whether it was part of the curriculum or just kind of volunteering activity of the teachers in those schools.
Yeah, that's all very interesting. We are focusing here on this angle of education, but what about the angle of nature? Like, did you analyze any other materials to see how Polish Jews were connected with this nature aspect of their surroundings? Like, I think in Yiddish books, it was quite mentioned. Like, I remember reading the book of the shtetl nearby my home, and on the one hand, they have this wooden synagogue they were proud of, but they were also describing how there were forests and small river, etc. So how does it work?
So I think that it's funny because in my my research now, my big project now on Jewish leisure, there are some subjects or topics that kind of you can see the influence from the Polish or also Western influences. So one of the things I think which I like the most is picking berries and nuts and mushrooms, obviously, in the forests, which is not exactly kind of Jewish way of life. I have to admit, I don't know how to pick mushrooms that won't poison me. But we can see, and it's interesting because I have a diary that he mentioned over there. The guy that wrote this diary, he mentioned we learn from the Polish how to pick mushrooms, how when to pick berries, and also how to fish. So in the river or in the lake. So this is one, example. Another example, which I also very fond of, and this is Farber that we talked about, the Tarbut teacher, is skiing. Ski became a very popular sport, let's say, in interwar Poland, and Polish Jews enjoy it very much. So Farber, for example, mentioned how he discovered the ski with one of his friends. I think that they went to Zakopane or something, and they had a ski trip. He describes how he bought all of his equipment, which again, it's not very Zionist, let's say. Okay, we have only one snowy mountain in Israel, so but again, it's some some kind of Western influence and also Polish influence that kind of get into the Polish the Jewish population in interwar Poland, and we can see all over. This is just two kind of examples, but which related in a way to nature, but we can also, mention the celebration of the New Year's Eve, which was again very popular among Polish Jews, and it's not exactly the most Jewish celebration in the calendar. So again, it's the kind of assimilation or cultural assimilation was not only in those nature kind of spots, but it was in other spheres of life.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to hear about how many different directions they were. Like, on the one hand, they were Zionists pulling to one direction. On the other, they were living in certain circumstances that they were put to these Western waves and Western kind of fashions. Like it was fashionable to ski, for example. So it's
and we took the Orthodox out of the discussion, right? So
yeah, why?
It's important to indicate that we also have this huge Orthodox community, Jewish Orthodox community. Some of them were gathered in the Agudat Israel or Hamizrahi, but again, we can see that also in those Orthodox communities, there were some elements of influences, or I'm afraid to say assimilation, but we'll stick with influences if we are talking about the yearly conferences of Agudat Israel that were held in Marienbad and all of those spa resorts, and we have the photo of Rav Kook walking in Marienbad, going to drink those salty water. And also I had this huge debate in the female of Agudat Israel regarding wigs and how the fashion kind of influence on how to present your hair or if to present your hair. So again, yeah, it's there, and it's again not purely Jewish.
Yeah, fascinating. And now I see that Paul asked follow-up question. He wants you to say, in essence, are you saying that the boundaries are too fluid to be able to answer this question directly?
Yeah, I think that it's fluid. Also, the borders are fluid. The transformation of even the population is kind of moved back and forth within those regions. So it's kind of hard to hard to answer this question. But I promise I'll think of it.
Okay, I will keep you two in touch, so we can continue afterwards. Are there any other questions? Maybe is anyone want to add something? Emma, maybe you have any afterthoughts about something you want to share with us that comes to mind with this topic?
Well, yeah, I think that when I started to think about it, I understood that there is this huge gap between what the image is kind of constructed in our minds of how Polish Jewry kind of live their life, and what the documents are telling us. And I think that this is my well, I hope that this is my contribution to history, that it's not always, the image itself. It's sometimes we need, to dig in and to look for those how to break those images. And yeah, this is my take-home message.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that it's a very interesting input from your research. To not be afraid to look into sources and to ask questions about how was it really.
Well, I don't know how it was really. I know how it was in my
yeah. But still, you don't believe just the first answer. You dig deeper.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I hope.
Probably. I think it's still a better picture that you used to believe really before.
Yeah. It is.
Thank you very much, Emma, for your lecture. We are meeting again on Thursday, and I want to thank very much everyone that connected with us today. And again, I want to introduce you very much to join us once again for the last time, unfortunately, in these surroundings, at least on Thursday, to say our goodbyes with a very sweet topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.